I'd like to call the order of the workshop for the Mayor and City Council for the month of November and ask Mayor Pro Tem Foster to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Joe.
You're very welcome. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for all of you for come out tonight. It's the day after election. I guess there's something for everybody in this election, I suppose. I'm not sure what, but there was. And that's what makes our system great. Before we begin our meeting tonight, though, I'd like to just pause for a moment and remember our city manager and former mayor, Henry Hine. I'm sure everyone is aware that Henry left us almost 2 weeks ago. Time really flies, it does. And just want to point out that Henry was a dear friend, and not only a dear friend of me, a dear friend of this council, and a dear friend of the citizens of Tawnytown. He worked long and hard and tirelessly to make Tawnytown a better place. I think he accomplished those goals very well. He'll be truly missed. I've had outpourings from all over the state offering condolences to me and to the town and to Lynn and her girls. Everyone has seemed to have an anecdote or a time or a special thought about Henry when they were sharing with me, and it did my heart good to hear those things. I'd like to just kind of read a short letter from the county commissioners that I received yesterday, and it's signed by all 5 members. It's addressed to me and the council. It says, "Dear members and mayor and council members, the Board of County Commissioners wishes to extend its deepest condolences on the passing of your town manager, Mr. Henry Hine. Henry was a strong leader and made tough decisions in the best interest of the residents of Tawnytown. He was committed to ensuring that Tawnytown preserve its rich heritage and remain a small town with a big heart. Henry Hine will be missed by all those throughout Carroll County and Maryland who had the pleasure of working with him, and we are sincerely sorry for your loss." And in sympathy, it's signed by the Dennis Frazier and Stephen Wantz, and Richard Weaver, Doug Howard, and Richard Rothschild. And that's probably a pretty good letter of what I've been hearing throughout the town, or throughout the state, when people call me and talk to me about this. I'd like to encourage folks in the audience during our time for public comment, if you feel like you'd like to get up and say a few words about Henry, please do so. We'll make time for that, even though it's not on the agenda. Right now, I'd like to ask council if they might like to say a few words. Anybody care to speak about Henry or make any comment?
Nice.
Start with you, Judy, since you're number 1 down there.
Thank you. I think the most important thing to remember about Henry is just how he was such a mentor for those of us that came in, maybe new to the process. He always was there to answer questions and always a phone call away. He and Lynn became very good friends, and he's going to be missed.
Thank you. Anyone else?
In going off of what Judy said, there were a lot of things that, a lot of wisdom that Henry was able to give to the rest of us. We, in the millennial generation, have this kind of arrogance where we think we know everything, and we do ourselves this really great disservice of ignoring people who have this kind of incredible wisdom. One of the very first things that Henry, helped teach me when I got elected was that you can come up to this bench and you can vehemently disagree with every other member of the council, but as long as you're able to step away and still be friendly and still be respectful to them, you're going to ensure a good working relationship with them. And he was absolutely right about that. Absolutely right about that. Maybe also on the maybe bit of a lighter story. Anybody who knows Henry knows that one of his favorite conversation starters were the words, "Well, you know." And based on the inflection in his voice, you could determine what direction the conversation was going to go. So if you went to Henry with an idea, and the inflection in his voice went up, "Well, almost like a question, you knew you were in for a good conversation. But if the inflection went down, you said, "Hey, Henry, I've got this idea," and Henry's response was, "Well, you knew you probably want to rethink the idea." But like Judy said, anytime you had questions or you needed advice or you wanted to talk something through, he was there, and that's that's a kind of wisdom and experience that you don't get too often anymore, and I will miss him dearly. I also want to, note that Linda's in the audience tonight, and I want to give her a round of applause because she stood by this town and by Henry for so long.
As I've previously stated, and it's been written in the paper, Henry was my mentor from day one when I got here. And he was also a caring person on a personal level. I saw Henry the Monday before he passed away. And I sat with him and talked with he and Linda. And we were just talking about all sorts of things. And Henry was, as sick as he was concerned of how I was coming along with my knee. And I had been sitting there talking to Linda about how far away Henry's room was at the nursing home and how far I had to walk. So I finally found a closer entrance, and it really wasn't the closest one. And Henry opens his eyes, and in the meantime, the mayor had called and said he was on his way to visit. Henry opens his eyes and says, "Diane, when Jim gets here, you give him your car keys and you tell him to move your car to that door." And he's pointing out the window. It's a door right there. And I said, "That's okay, Henry. I can make it. I'm close enough." Jim walks in the door. "Give him your keys. Jim, go move Diane's car."
I did.
And that's just how he was.
I worked with Henry for a little over 6 years. When I first thought about running for city council, he was one of the first people I talked to. And at the time, I'd only heard of Henry Hine. I hadn't been involved, and I was told to talk to Henry Hine. And I did. And from that moment on, it was, if I ever needed insight, if I ever needed advice, if I ever needed somebody to beat me down to the size, it was Henry. And it was, no matter when I would stop by here, no matter when I would call him, he always answered. And he always took the time. Even if he was doing something, you could tell he was doing something, he just wouldn't admit it to you. And it was amazing to have, and we use the word mentor, and that's exactly what he was, because I think he took each and every one of us under his wing. because he's been here. I mean, he was here for I don't know how many years he served the city, and it was such an honor and a pleasure to have known him and to have worked with him, and he will be missed. I mean, it's left a hole in the city, in City Hall. It's left a hole here on council for sure, and I thank everyone in his family for the support that you gave him, because I know that this city took him away from you many times, and we appreciate your sacrifice in allowing us to have him when we did. And just our thoughts and prayers are definitely with you. That's all.
Well, the first time I met Henry Hine was, I believe it was one of those wonderful oyster dinners that Doris and John Harner used to have at the Tonytown Activities Building. One of the highlights of this town, even when I didn't live in this town, was coming to Tonytown for that Federation of Republican Club women's annual event. They had speakers like J. Glenn Bell and various folks. And when you would meet with Henry, like we did when I was first elected, any subject, because of the year's experience, he knew where to go to get the answer. He knew how that had gone in other towns. He was involved in MML and had an idea how other towns did things, and that kind of richness of experience will be missed in Tonytown.
Thank you, Don. Len, would you like to say a few words to everybody? Can you do that for us?
My pleasure. My husband, Henry C. Hine Jr., Tonytown City Manager, passed away a week and a half ago from esophageal cancer. I just want to mention a few of the many, many who visited, phone called, sent cards, brought food, and prayed for and with Henry. Those things helped to carry Henry through his toughest, most painful days. I have to mention the mayor, our good friend Jim McCarron, who often visited daily. Jim was crucial to Henry's beautiful spiritual journey. I need to also remember Joe Vigliotti's daily visits. Even when Henry could not move or speak, that Joe was there. Rick and June Hess were our everything friends. They did everything, not the least being to shuttle our daughter Kathy to and from BWI to be with us. Carl Ebal took us to every one of Henry's University of Maryland hospital appointments. I've lost track of how many times that was. Barb and Larry Hildebridle were there in every way. Multiple cards and visits, bringing us food, and even helping to make Henry's meds a little more gentle. Others who were crucial in Henry's last months, weeks, and days were Mayor Pro Tem Diane Foster, other council people, Brad Wentz and Judy Fuller, and Joe, who I previously mentioned. All of the Tonytown City employees were wonderful with their visits. I know that Henry, even when he could no longer speak, enjoyed the visits of Bob Mitchell, Kevin Smeek, and Dan Dennis. He absolutely heard every funny thing they said. Jay Gullo, our Tonytown City Council and city attorney and friend, happened to be out of the country as Henry reached his final days. Still, Jay called to check on him. Our good friend and neighbor, Jackie Bouvet, was always with us, offering a very compassionate, listening ear. Excuse me. I can't begin to name the many others who walked with us all through Henry's open heart surgery and then his battle with cancer. The last few months before Henry passed was eye-opening. It was obvious how many lives he touched by the number of people who cared so deeply. He's always been a people person with a heart full of gold. Thank you from my family to everyone who was there for Henry in any way. As I told Henry many times a day, I love you to the universe and back. It wasn't enough for Henry for me to say to the moon and back. And Henry loved Tawnytown and its people to the universe and back. Thank you.
Beautiful, Lynn, thank you. But we have a workshop to run, so we must move on. The first item of business is the review of the minutes for October 3rd and October 9th. Regular minutes, or regular meetings. Does anyone have any additions or corrections to those minutes?
Mr. Mayor, on the December 3rd, there's a note on the second page regarding the closed session being opposed. I think it should be noted, as it is in the closed minutes, the member of the audience who did oppose that. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? All right, they'll be up for approval on Tuesday night.
Tuesday, not Monday,
Gotta
that's
get-
right.
Gotta get myself straight here.
Veterans Day.
Veterans Day actually is on Sunday, but because we're government employees, we celebrate it on Tuesday
Monday.
or Monday.
Celebrate
But
it on
Monday, Monday is closed, in other words. That's
Mr. Mayor,
what
you're
I'm
going to
trying
confuse all of us here.
and I've already
Happened
confused
before.
myself, so. Just before I get into to the further agenda, just to make sure you pay attention to those reminders. Speaking of Veterans Day, we have an event Sunday at the Legion, if you can make it. And, of course, the reminder for the meeting next week on Tuesday. And one more reminder is this Thursday, the 11th, 11/8, we'll be visiting Tawny's Corporation and celebrating their 60th anniversary in Tawnytown, which is an amazing thing. So, some things coming up. Now it's time for public comment pertaining to non-agenda items. Would anyone care to make a comment? Feel free to talk about it.
Okay, well, I've got more than 3 minutes, I won't need it. I'd like to say this. Town's been through an awful lot of trauma lately, and with the passing of Henry, it certainly was rough. Henry was a great guy, and I've known him for many, many years, many years. And I want to tell you something. In 2007, when I came on council, I'll admit, Henry and I were not on the same page. Right? We weren't even in the same book. But I learned by keeping my mouth shut when he talked that he knew what he was talking about. And as a consequence, as the years went on, I followed him more closely. And eventually we actually became very, very good friends, and also with the family. I'd like to say a lot of good things have been said about him. A lot of good things more will be said. I'd like to thank the majority of the council that spent so much time there this last few days. And Jim, you too. You missed your calling. You really, truly did. That was a wonderful thing that you put out. One other thing I'd like to say about Henry. Henry, of course, was military. And Henry, I thank you for that. And your 2 girls. Great. Great. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor and Council, It's time to
Barbara, just identify yourself for the record.
Barbara Cook on Clubside Drive. It's time to rethink any bypass for Tawny Town. The present route and why it fails Tawny Town, I have listed 4 reasons. It invites all the trucks and commuters into the city. This is traffic that spends little or no money in town. It channels truck traffic into small country roads south of here, then into congested commercial areas like Walkersville and west. A new and more accommodating route for Tawny Town would be north of town. And I have listed 5 reasons. All trucks and commuters would be diverted away from Old Tawny Town. Trucks and commuters would be directed to Route 15. And Maryland Route 15 is already prepared for heavy traffic. Tawny Town would be free to use our streets for our activities, like parades and things we can't do now. Our commercials downtown could then thrive. The action needed now, a letter to Maryland State Roads from the city and for Maryland State Roads to pursue an alternative route north of Tawny Town should be executed at this present time. This would give the citizens time to express their views. In closing, there's another huge reason for this action by the town and the state. The top reason for this change, you're asking 700 citizens over the age of 55, some of them without the best vision, to make a left-hand turn in front of tankers and semis and cars is a plan for disaster. The citizens will oppose it strongly. Why wait? This is something well worth looking at right now. And I thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you, Barbara. As some of you know, the Tawny Town bypass has been on the books since the late 60s. And while it is a worthy project, and I truly think it is, I guess there's always other priorities that seem to come along. But one thing we have an opportunity of doing is that we could get to meet once a year with State Highway gurus and kind of let them know what our priorities are. In past years, we have done that. Past years, the bypass has been on that priority list. The formula is basically that we convince the county this is something that we need to do, and then they put it on their priority list, and it happens to be, then it appears on the state priority list. It's not been there for several years, and maybe it's time to raise it again. I know Jim and I think we've got a meeting coming up here in the next couple of weeks that we can address this. So thank you for those comments. Barbara, they're rather timely, so it's good to remind us that just because it's been on the books for 60 years doesn't mean it's necessarily going to go away. So thank you very much. Anyone else? Robin.
I'll just add to that discussion as a commissioner. When I served last time, I tried to make sure that bypass was
Robin,
a little bit closer to the top.
Identify yourself, please.
I'm sorry, Robin Fraser, Bentley Street.
Thanks.
And one of the problems was the Oler property back then was difficult getting a sale with them. We had somebody who was interested in purchasing it. We thought we had it sold, and they were going to give the easement for the bypass, which was a large portion of it, but it ended up falling through. So I know that it's not all state and county, but the property owners as well has
Right.
to fall into line. So, but I do hope it goes well. I also wanted to mention that I think it's very good for Tawnytown that the administration didn't change and that Governor Hogan won and made history, being the only Republican to win a second term. But that makes it good for the people that you've made relationships with, the policies you're used to, and the projects that are already underway, and money you were hoping you were going to get, and that's all going to continue. And I think that's very good for Tawnytown, and I'm happy that Governor Hogan got back in. And I also just wanted to mention, as one of the small clubs in Tawnytown, Republican Women's Club of Tawnytown, we had 2 people in our club that won in this last election. Vice President Catherine Adelaide was elected to the Republican Central Committee, and that's a county-wide seat, and that's quite an accomplishment. And Tara Battaglia is a member of our club and won on the Board of Education, which maybe was a bit of an upset, but we were very happy to see her get that position. So I didn't know if you knew that, but thought you might like to know. And then I would just like to say that I knew Henry for quite some time. I think he was a mayor the first time I was a county commissioner in 98 to 2002. I don't know if that's correct. That sounds right. Yeah, and I think that's probably when I got to know him the most. I appreciated when I ran in Tawnytown in 2010 that he encouraged me and told me he was voting for me. Don't worry, and that was nice. And when you talk to Henry about his service, he was very proud of his service in political arena, and he would just light up and tell lots of good stories. He once told us that he was good friends with Martin O'Malley and how excited he was that he was running for president and that kind of thing, and that he knew him. And so it was, you know, good to be able to chat and learn some things from Henry, and I'm sure he'll, like everyone has said, he'll be missed by many.
Anyone else care to make any remarks? Well, thank you very much, everyone. I need to ask the council, is there any state or any conflict of interest that may appear on the agenda tonight?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. Move into resolutions, ordinances, and agreements. And for approval on Tuesday, we have a contract amendment for the street and holiday lights. Anybody have any questions on that? Talked about that last month.
Yes.
We also have up for adoption ordinance 06-2018, a budget amendment, which will allow us to put in some money-saving lights, I believe. Do you have any questions on that? And we also have resolution 2016-12, the water allocation for November. Anybody have any questions on that? All right. Move into the city manager's report. Jim, what do you have for us tonight?
Just a couple quick updates. Hopefully we'll have a draft capital projects plan and capital equipment plan for you in December. In talking with the department heads, a lot of the work was already completed on narrowing that plan down to the 6 years, and we just had to reset some permissions in the system for me to be able to access the information. So hopefully next month we'll have a draft in your packet. Just a reminder about the Tawny Stair visit that is scheduled for tomorrow at 9:30. And the Planning Commission is currently reviewing the intent section for the downtown business district. We've been talking off and on about some code text amendments, and we've kind of started with downtown business because there are some things going on in that district right now that we want to try to get on top of. And so that's under review currently. And I do have one other note that's not in the report, and that is we did have a water main leak over the weekend on Fairground Avenue. It's estimated that we lost about 20,000 gallons. There's a temporary repair on the main now, but we're going to need to go in and replace a section of pipe, so that takes a little bit longer. So if you do get questions about activity on Fairground Avenue, that's what's going on over there. So hopefully we'll get it patched up permanently and the road patched up this coming week.
Is there an interruption of service because of that?
Very briefly.
Just briefly?
Just once the leak was exposed, water was turned off briefly for the patch to be put on, but residents were out of service for a very short amount of time.
And the repair is the same, not a lengthy repair?
It's essentially a patch repair was done currently, but because of the crack, the size of the crack that was in the line, Public Works decided that it would be better to avoid a recurring issue with that section of pipe, just to go back in and replace a section of pipe, which is a little bit of a larger, well, it's a larger undertaking than just doing the patch.
I think the councilman was asking if there would be another interruption when they do the final fix on it.
Well, there would be a lengthy one.
Not a lengthy one.
Okay.
So the time-consuming thing is really finding the actual leak, and once they've dug down and exposed it, the actual repair is a fairly quick process.
Great. Good to know that.
Any questions further for Jim? Any questions on the departmental reports? I had one, I think. It was on Bob Mitchell's report. And in number 2, he's talking about sport programs, and I've begun distributing the donated AEDs to the sports programs. What's AEDs?
External
Defibrillators.
What is it?
External defibrillators.
Oh, yes, I remember now. Gotcha.
He knew that.
They were given to us from, all right, that's all the question I had. Anybody else? All right, how about the legal report, Jay? Do you have something for us tonight?
Yeah, Mayor, I have 3 items for you. The Meads Crossing Railroad Crossing Agreement finally is finished. That has taken, as you know, every month I talk to you, it's been all summer long. And so I wanted to give you the salient terms that you'd be interested in and what the agreement is. As you know, we sparred continuously over the right-of-way, the use of the word right-of-way, whether the railroad had ownership or not. And the railroad finally indicated that they didn't, and they literally said they don't care whether they own the place or not, that this agreement is going to be signed. It doesn't matter. So with that up against us, we came up with some way to come up with an agreement. So if you can imagine a railroad crossing going across the street, you know, there's the rails, there's the piece in between the rails, and you know, it's longitudinal as well. So if you measure 2 feet from either side of the rails out, we're going to term that the railroad crossing. And anything from that 2-foot mark in between there is their responsibility to take care of. And anything prior to that 2 feet and on the other side of that 2 feet is going to be the city's road. So we would maintain that. If we had to pave it, cut it up, whatever the story is, we would do that. And anything in that section, 2 feet from either side of the rail, is the railroads to maintain. So the next issue was who pays for the cost of the railroads maintaining that, because they said they're not going to pay for a new crossing. Why should they pay for that every year to maintain it? That's not just the pavement, but the crossing lights and the things like that. And so, of course, we said, well, the city is not going to maintain and pay for that either, because it is something is required with the Meads Crossing development. And so eventually it's come out that the Meads Crossing Homeowners Association, in their foundation documents, will have that requirement that they need to pay for the annual maintenance. To make it a little more palatable, because they are going to be our citizens, there's a cap I think it's $500 a year and an escalator since this will be in perpetuity, of what it can go up to. The city's also impacted if we ever needed to do work in there. I mean, 2 feet from the rail will still get you hit by a train if you're in 2 feet from the rail. So if we need to do work in that area that's 2 feet from the rail, we need to coordinate with the railroad and let them know. And that shouldn't be a big deal. It's not a main line, but that has to happen as well. The other issue that was unpalatable, but really we couldn't reach any agreement to, is the fact that in the event we wanted to do anything else other than the road crossing, so let's say we wanted to put a fiber optic line or a water line or a sewer line or something in the road but under the tracks, we need to get their permission, is what the story is going to be. And of course, getting their permission has been a difficult thing. They've taken us 6 months. So we finally stated that we would only agree to it if they had to give us permission, which they can't unreasonably withhold, which means if it's unsafe and it'll undermine their railroad, they could say no. But they have to give us that permission within 30 days, or else we're just allowed to do it. So we don't move faster than that, so that's probably okay.
Is there, I'm sorry, Jay, is there
Sure.
like is there a degree of measurement beneath the railroad? I mean, like if we go down 10 feet, do we still have to ask their permission?
If you cross it, there was an argument made by the specialist attorney that there have been fights over things that are 30 feet under the railroad where they say it's unsafe. So, we cross that bridge when we come to it, but there's a time period, which is the most important thing that we have. Then the last issue that they had was, you remember, they wanted the city to take out a insurance policy to insure their crossing for any negligent acts. And that's not something that we can do. I mean, it's just, since we're a self-insured pool, we just can't do that. We gave them a copy of the insurance. The city manager worked with Legit to get that nailed down. And so we gave them our certificate of insurance saying, this is what we're covered for. And they said, okay, that's sufficient. And the language in the agreement, it's, legalese, but basically you realize we have tort immunity and we have a tort cap. So we have the ability not to be sued for certain things. And so that applies as well. So it reads something like, to the limits allowed by law, and then our insurance comes in and takes over. So it's a good agreement. Everybody is happy the whole way around. The mechanics are going to be the fact that Meads Crossing is responsible for everything that happens out there until we take the road over. So it's going to be like any other road. It's not our problem until the road's taken over. And when the road's taken over, then everything I just described to you happens for us. The Meads Crossing has to pay to put the crossing in, including the lights and things like that. And they wanted it done by the end of October, so that didn't happen. And now their lead time is 7 weeks. Is what they said. They might be able to get 7 weeks, which is still critical to them because they need to get that in so they can do their building, but it is what it is. So your authority gave the mayor to sign the agreement. He signed the agreement yesterday, and we sent off our pages, and hopefully it happens there. Just remember this, if the railroad ever comes and needs things from us. Okay, because remember where we started, $45,000 extraction of generosity to this, and how long it's taken. So, any questions on the agreement?
Sounds like you did very good work in negotiating that.
I feel like Dinah working on the railroad every day. All right.
Show up to any meetings with a conductor hat on?
They didn't even give us any of those, nothing, right?
Jeez.
So
You got screwed.
that's right. Okay, the next issue that I want to talk about is the council gave direction for us to act on the Ethics Commission's recommendations that happened in the summer. As you recall, the Ethics Commission met and said they recommended to you some changes to the campaign finance ordinance, basically the bumps in the road that they had in the last election cycle. And as we are approaching another election cycle, it's now time to take this and really look at it. As you recall, there were 3 main areas. The first area, and this dealt with campaign finance, was the ability to put fines or penalties. Right now, if there's a violation, there's really nothing they can do except saying you're in violation. So they wanted language added that says that. They wanted language that made it explicit that they could ask for any of the materials or bank statements relevant to the election from a candidate. Right now, it's not in there, it's implied, but they want it specifically said. If you have a bank statement for a campaign finance account, You need to give that to us if we ask for it, and any of the related things like checks or receipts and things like that. You think of it like an IRS audit. You figure you have to give it, but the language is now be specific. And then the last is to require a checking account. Remember, we went round and round about could you use your own checking account? Did you create a checking account? And I keep saying checking account. We said in the ordinance bank account. So some of the accounts that were set up were savings accounts, which naturally means that when you pull money out of there, they're going to be cash transactions. There's no check to follow this. So those go hand in hand. They wanted to basically to say that you're not going to use savings accounts, you're only going to use checking accounts, and you're not going to have cash transactions. So everything can be followed. So those were the main items. There were some that the staff came up with as far as like timing of filing forms and things like that. And our goal is to have something to you for introduction at the next month's meeting in December so that you can look at it over the holidays and see what you think. And then you can enact it in January if you like. And if you don't do it in January, you still have February to do it. The election cycle will start in March. So, any questions on that? Okay. And lastly, just an update, really not much to talk about, but the town received 3 complaints filed by Robin Frazier to the Open Meeting Compliance Board for alleged violations of 3 different meetings of open meetings violations. So the town has the statutory response that needs to go into the Open Meetings Compliance Board, and then there's a chance for rebuttal from the complainant, and then the town can rebut that, and then the Open Meeting Compliance Board makes a decision. So that will be happening towards the end of this year, and we'll hear something possibly in December, January, something like that.
Any questions for Jay? Okay. Under old business, we have the, doesn't seem like it's too old, but we have the National Civil War Memorial. You know, we've had the sculptor Gary Castile before us last month. The council taken a trip up to his studio and viewed his work since then. And I think everybody was duly impressed. And what my idea is here, probably if I get a consensus from the council that we should move forward with this project, at least to the next stage, that's what I'm looking for. And my proposal is to allow staff to come up with an idea of some locations that would be suitable for this project, and then maybe present them to us in the next meeting, and we can decide on whether or not what we think the best project is. I personally think the easier access we have to downtown, the better the location, because it will drive our economic engine like you won't believe. But anyway, basically what I thought we could do is between now and next meeting is try to come up with some possible sites, and then we might discuss them and decide what we'll do, where we go from here. Perhaps at that point, once we select the site, we'll form a committee and officially let Mr. Castile know that we're moving forward. So, is that agreeable to everybody?
Sounds wonderful.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Much so.
All right, very good. That's our plan. My glasses broke. So I keep falling off my face. There'll be a chance to speak at the end, Jackie. Next we have new business. Monthly financial report. Anybody have any questions on the monthly financial report? I'll be up for approval on Tuesday. How about the accounts payable? Anybody have any questions for accounts payable? All right. Next, we have the LED street light project, and this is the awarding of the bid for the street lights. There's the bid tabulations in the back of your packages tonight. And you'll notice the contractor from Thermont came in with a low bid by a couple $100, and Kevin seems to think this is the best bid, so that'll be up for approval. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay. Next item is city manager vacancy, and of course we need to address that. In addition to the loss of Henry and his talents to the city, it's come at a rather inopportune time. The fact that we're at the cusp of the holiday season makes the idea of beginning a city manager search probably not so prudent. What I would like to suggest is that we allow our acting city manager to continue in this position at least through the holidays, and then perhaps then discuss the need to either advertise for a city manager or whatever we want to do to discuss it. Then, of course, we have an election in May, so if we decide to advertise and send out requests for interest, then we may want to put a 90-day time frame around that to get us beyond the election. But that's my thoughts on what we should do with city manager. I think that if it'll be fair to Jim to continue on in this present mode, we probably should offer him a little more money too, that maybe as the entry-level city manager level or something like that, get him through the holiday season. Ho, ho, ho. So that's my thoughts on that. Anybody have any comments, thoughts? All right. Well,
Slightly off topic, but relating to what you just did. I remember my first year on council, there's a meeting, I think it was in September, and we're waiting, to begin the meeting. And I remember, Mayor, you started drumming in front of you, and Henry looks at you and says, "Hey, little drummer boy, you got 2 months to go."
Oh, well, I must have had something on my mind. Okay. We'll get the consensus council on Monday on that. Mm-hmm. Now it's time for public comment pertaining to agenda items. Anyone care to make a remark?
Jackie Jones, Clubside Drive at Carol Vista. I saw in the paper about this statue, or guess that's what you call it. Anyway, no, what do we call it?
It's not a statue. It's a
Memorial.
It's a memorial that commemorates the Civil War from 1861 to 1865.
And really all I know is what I have read in the paper. And I believe almost half of what I read. So, but anyway, no offense to the paper really, but I have several questions about it. It seems to me that all throughout the states that everything about Civil War is coming down. They're taking it away. I guess I don't know, I haven't heard this gentleman's explanation of his memorial, basically. My questions were what it's going to cost the town, where are we going to put it, which you have said the council will decide where it's going to be going. I hate to see more traffic coming through town because of this corner and traffic light. It's really a dangerous spot, and all the more reason we've got to get the state to finish the bypass, or to at least get an attempt and get our dibs in for money for that bypass, because it takes several years, I'm sure. We're working with the government. My other thing is the upkeep of it, and why why should we have this memorial? I can't see what I read in the paper saying it'll bring more traffic to the city. It may bring more traffic, but will it bring people who were going to spend their money here? That's what I want, because I think we need to get things here that will spend money, give us money here, really, and more jobs, et cetera, and so forth. So my big question, I guess, is why? But I have a husband that told me I couldn't come home unless I got up and spoke about this.
Okay.
So I want to go home, because that's where my bed is, but and I want to listen to the news to see how the Democrats helped Mr. Hogan get in office. You have to give us that credit. But we're happy to have him anyway, because I think he was very fair. That's me getting off the subject like Edith Bunker. So anyway, my big question is, why do we have to have this memorial?
Okay.
I mean, what's the explanation?
Well, first of all, number one, this is in the very beginning stages of happening. And as the project goes on, we're going to involve everybody that's interested in it. It's going to have a say of what they think or what they want to do. The possibility of first of all, the most important thing is that all of our modern wars have memorials. Vietnam and Korea and Second World War and First World War and so forth. The war where we've lost more Americans than any other time in our history was the war between the states, the Civil War. And this memorial will recognize those men who died for our country, for their country. It's not a Confederate memorial that you're hearing about people taking statues down to Confederate soldiers, but it's a memorial that commemorates all those men, on both sides, blue and gray, that fought and died for their country. The idea of having it in Tawnytown is a wonderful idea, in my opinion, because it will bring tourist dollars into town. It'll bring a significant amount of tourist dollars in town. And I can think of no other better project to ensure the bypass than something like this. If this project starts to move forward, starts to gain traction, and looks like it's become a reality, we'll have a lot bigger stick to talk to the State Highway Administration about when we talk to them about a bypass.
I agree with that.
And I think this would be the one thing that may make the difference in getting the bypass, or waiting another 50, 60 years to get that bypass. So everything, again, just to let your husband know, Jackie, that everything is new. We don't have a lot of details yet. As far as the cost to the city, there's no cost to the city other than providing a spot for it to be. There's already a 501(c) corporation set up to fund this project. They can't collect a dime until they get a site. But this will be a self-sustaining facility that will have money built in for maintenance. It'll have money built in for repairs, and of course it'll be fully insured and proper. The advantage of having it in Tawnytown is it speaks loudly for the men on both sides of the conflict. Because Maryland was a free state, was a neutral state, it would be a well-represented place to have this monument. If it were in Pennsylvania or Virginia or Georgia, then you'd say, oh, well, this is a Yankee memorial, this is a Confederate memorial. But because it's in a free state, because it's a testimony to both sides, I don't know of a better, and because it's located close to Gettysburg, I don't think there could be a better spot for it. And I think we're very privileged and honored to get this opportunity. But regardless, before the first shovel of dirt is turned everybody will have a chance to weigh in on how they feel about it. I promise you that.
Okay, I'll try to explain that to him, but anyway, I'd like to see another article in the paper that defines it more or less like you did than what I presumed it did.
Well, again, we will, again, this is, in my opinion, it's the biggest thing that's ever happened to Tawny Town. And I only think that it can certainly set us apart from many other towns of our size in the state if we can offer a memorial like this to our children and our grandchildren. And that's what it's all about. That's what the sculptor told us the other night. He said, if this generation doesn't do this, it'll never get done. And I believe that 100%.
Oh, and Mr. Mayor, Jackie, if I could add just two quick things. The Times have put together, the Carroll County Times put together 2 excellent articles about the presentation and the visit to Mr. Castile's studio. So if you didn't get a chance to read the first one, it's definitely, good reading material. But also, if you watch our meeting from last month on YouTube, you'll be able to see Mr. Castile's entire presentation. And then in addition to that, going off of what the mayor said, right, in my mind, I think this is a phenomenal thing. The heart of this memorial, right, is going to feature a Union and Confederate veteran reunited after the war. And with the way that things have become so divisive these days, this is a kind of thing that, in my mind anyways, is going to be more healing than anything.
You know, Joe, I would agree with you, but to a certain extent. We have not unionized. We have not.
Mr. Mayor, can I say a word before you leave this subject? At the end of Trevanion Road on the far end, when you get to Uniontown, right across from where the road comes out, are 2 or 3 iron signs near the old school that kind of explain the very important nature of Tawny Town as a crossroads to the Battle of Gettysburg that gets hundreds of thousands of visitors a year. The fact is, we are, because of, we have Meads Crossing, we have a really unique opportunity to be part of people's trip to see the Gettysburg Memorial. And if you read those iron placards there, you can understand how much activity occurred up and down these roads and through this town that were just that were pivotal to the turning point of the Civil War. So I think it's just an amazing opportunity to let these people go forward because it is fully funded and insured and maintained, and because we are such a unique crossroads in this conflict.
We do indeed. We do indeed. That's well said, Don. We're on.
Just me again. There are a couple of military memorials in this country that are much like this thing that's planned here. And I might suggest that you try to contact them and see how this thing runs. There's a World War I museum in Kansas City, a beautiful thing. I've been to it, I'm going back to it again probably next summer. Fantastic. There is a World War II museum in Louisiana, and off the top of my head, I can't, where is it? Is it New Orleans? Okay, I wasn't sure it was. You have that, and I haven't been to that, but I understand it's really quite nice. And of course, there's a Marine Corps museum down right outside of Washington. That is really something to see. We can learn something, I think, by going to these different things. I understand some of Jackie's questions, and they're very, very salient at this particular point. But there's a lot of things to look at here, and I agree with the mayor. This could really be the tipping point for this town. I thank you.
Yep, thank you. Anyone else? Robin?
Robin Fraser, Bentley Street. On this same discussion, I think the traffic part of this is probably the most difficult thing. And I believe there's a traffic study going to be done at the square here sometime soon, if it hasn't already been done. And I would just suggest that as you talk about locations, that you go ahead and include pretty early on, the traffic folks who understand how things work. And I do agree with you that it might be a great opportunity to push the bypass, especially depending on which piece of property you end up on. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity for Tawny Town. I think there are some other groups that might be interested. I mean, you have the historic groups, you have art groups, as well as economic development. So as you move along, you might want to try to invite them in or see if there's other grants or other things that might help you to get some of these things paid for, like the road.
We absolutely will.
And I was going to say one other thing, but I can't remember. Oh, I was going to say that we just recently went to one of the memorials in DC, and it was beautiful, but it didn't have what this fella is talking about, which is a little bit more words about the actual history. So instead of it just being something pretty that you look at, they're going to have placards that explain from different points of view, different people that were involved. He mentioned how many from what sectors, but
They 16 military figures, 16 civilian figures, and 16 events, right? That led
yeah,
up to the
so
war.
it's really going to be a great educational memorial, not just something pretty to look at.
That's the
so
whole purpose,
that's
is to teach our
really
kids.
Awesome, I think. So I think it's very exciting.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'd like to say a little about Henry. Henry had a welcoming smile, and he always wanted to answer my questions, and I asked him some pretty tricky ones. I wasn't trying to trick him, I just wondered if he had to answer. So when I was on the Water and Sewer Committee, I said, "Hey, Henry, what's the bill for running that water and sewer building over there?" And he said, "Well, it'll take me a while, I'll get you an answer." So he called me up, and I hope this impresses you because I'm going to come back and haunt you with it next year. To run that building, just for the electricity, is $343,594.76. That's a lot of money. And I encourage the citizens to take 2 copies of this and talk it over with your neighbor. We can't wait till bulldozers and laternos and earth movers show up and then say, "Oh, well, we've changed our mind." And maybe you haven't, maybe you need to think about it, but now is the time.
Anyone else? Well, thank you all for your participation this evening and your good words. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those like sign.